80 passengers test positive 7 days after arriving in Nigeria. Nigeria turns 60 on Thursday. Federal government to observe low-key celebration. In international news, U.S. President Donald Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden engage in the dual-league presidential debate. And in sport, Sunshine Stars players roar over unpaid salaries.
This is ANN News.
We apologize for the poor audio. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. The number of coronavirus infections in the country 8,647 on Tuesday after the Nigeria Center for Disease Control announced 187 new cases. The infections were confirmed in 12 states and the Federal Capital Territory, with Lagos hosting 74 of the cases. Plateau and Rivers states each confirmed 25 cases, while Gombe and the Federal Capital Territory recorded 19 each. Nearly 50,000 patients have recovered, and sadly 1,111 have died of the disease. 80 international passengers who recently arrived in Nigeria have tested positive 7 days after they entered the country. The Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 said on Tuesday this is the reason for repeat COVID-19 testing being conducted on international travelers after 7 days of arriving in the country. Task Force Chairman Dr. Sani Aliyu said the 80 positive tests were detected out of the more than 2,400 tests that have been conducted on arriving passengers. He said the passengers who tested positive had arrived with earlier negative PCR tests. The PTF chairman has warned foreign travelers to make payments to only those laboratories listed on the government's travel portal. The All Progressives Congress APC has selected the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, to head a reconciliation committee that has been set up to resolve the crisis facing the Ekiti State chapter of the party. The crisis rocking the party in Ekiti State has worsened and has led to the suspension of some members of the party. The suspensions were effected when they refused to withdraw court cases filed against the party. The party has required its members to observe caution and to support ongoing efforts to amicably resolve the internal crisis. It's another Independence Day tomorrow when the country will celebrate 60 years of freedom from colonial rule. To mark the occasion, the federal government has given everyone a day off from work. Announcing the public holiday, Minister of Interior Rauf Aregbesola said on Tuesday, Nigeria is the world's leading black nation. He said Nigeria's warmth, welcoming spirit, and abundant wealth in human capital and richness of the land makes the country Africa's pride and beacon of hope. He assured the nation of the government's commitments to socio-economic transformation. Aregbesola says the country's independence celebration this year will be low-key because of the COVID-19 pandemic. United Nations human rights experts have called for the immediate release of the young Nigerian musician who was sentenced to death by a Kano Sharia court for blasphemy. 22-year-old Yahaya Sharif Aminu got into trouble when he released on social media a song that was considered blasphemous. The UN experts have called on Nigerian authorities to overturn the death sentence that was pronounced on Sharif Aminu last month. In a joint statement, the experts said they are deeply concerned over what they call serious lack of due process in the case. They want the federal government to guarantee his safety and due process rights when he appeals his conviction. All the states in the Federation have hauled the federal government to court, challenging the presidential executive orders signed in May on the funding of the courts. The states are asking the Supreme Court to declare President Muhammadu Buhari's executive order as unconstitutional. The executive order is placing the burden of funding capital and recurrent expenditure of the state high courts, Sharia Court of Appeal, and the customary Court of Appeal to state governments. The State Attorney General called the President's executive order a clear violation of the Constitution that places the responsibility for funding the courts on the federal government. The 36 states say they have been funding the capital projects in those courts since 2009 and would like the Supreme Court to order the federal government to refund them. Coming up, African stories. Tunisian health authorities advise vulnerable groups in the country to get regular flu shots as season approaches amid COVID-19. And later, international news. U.S. President Donald Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden engage in vitriolic presidential debate.
You are watching ANN.
Whether in your house, at your office, on your phone or online, we are there. We have the facts behind the headlines. We cut to the chase with the news you really need. We cover every angle. We are the bigger, better news network. We are African News Network. ANN. Watch ANN News on MITV from a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. The regular flu season is coming up in many parts of the world, and that could compound the coronavirus in many countries. To avoid complications for vulnerable groups, Tunisia Health Authority, the ministry, is recommending regular flu shots, and correspondent Agni Chawochi reports.
The Director General of the Pasteur Institute in Tunis declared that social groups most prone to contracting COVID-19, as well as the seasonal flu, are older people, patients with chronic diseases, as well as pregnant women.
The
impact of the seasonal flu should not be neglected or ignored. We are at the beginning of the flu season in autumn and winter, while we're witnessing the spread of the coronavirus. The symptoms can look the same, but the two illnesses are caused by different viruses.
Dr. Hashmi Louzir added that 310,000 doses of vaccine against the seasonal flu will be available in hospitals, private pharmacies and clinics on the 1st of October.
The flu vaccine is necessary. It does not cure or protect from COVID-19, but limits it. The two viruses are different in terms of immunity. The seasonal flu vaccine will help healthcare units determine the nature of the virus. Otherwise, if the most vulnerable people do not opt for the flu vaccine, confusion will reign as hospitals are already overwhelmed.
Tunisia's COVID-19 task force reported 50 infection cases per 100,000 inhabitants. The number of cases requiring hospitalization has also increased.
In this period, if we seek to reduce the pace of the spread of the virus, we do not have any choice except the implementation of the preventive measures. This is a shared responsibility. We are all responsible for the protection of those most vulnerable.
Infectious disease experts warned of a possible second wave of COVID-19 if citizens do not follow health protocols. According to the COVID-19 task force, the sharp rise in recent days in the number of deaths, infections, hospitalizations and calls to the emergency units is alarming and very dangerous. Experts say the risk of infection will increase over the next few days, which will be characterized by falling temperatures and cold.
Educational systems in many African countries provide for the operation of private schools that have no government funding or assistance. Most of those schools survive by tuition and fees paid by students. As correspondent Isabel Nakia reports, the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing many private schools in Uganda to permanently close.
Richard Buyondo has walked a rough journey since school closed in March. His Elbaris group of schools was forced to send away all the teachers because he couldn't afford to pay their salaries. Buyondo was also finding it hard to continue paying for the teachers' accommodation. He's now turned some classrooms into teachers' quarters.
We could not continue renting outside the community.
So we decided, since we have empty spaces in the school, let them come and get accommodated in the school. As we wait, once we start again, then we shall re-rent them outside. So we are saving the pressure from the landlords because there's no income coming in.
A number of schools in Uganda have been redesigned for use as guest houses or rental houses to try and earn some money from them. Some have had to sell off their properties. About 1.2 million learners are expected to report back to school on 15th October, but there is uncertainty on whether all of them will be back. Apart from some schools having to shut down, several people have lost jobs and they will not be able to afford paying school fees. Uganda is reopening schools for final year students only as part of lifting COVID-19 restrictions. School owners like Buyondo are worried they may not be able to run their schools efficiently when they eventually reopen due to the huge loans they are servicing.
We also have loans that we need to take care of, that, we plan like this year, we will take this amount of money, do this amount of development, then pay over a year, which means all those loans have not been able to be, we've not paid them, we've not met our obligations. And then the banks, they have not been very helpful.
The government has announced it will support private schools with a grant of about $5.4 million, but this money has not yet been released. Some teachers have now started saving on cooperative schemes to raise money.
We want to use this circle to see that we build a financial arm where we do save little money we get onto our income, and we create reserve so that in future when we have another pandemic or another problem, we're able to sustain our schools longer than the situation we have been in.
School owners say having only final year students in school won't help sort their financial difficulties. Buyondo is still holding on to his Elbury schools, but he's urging the government to consider allowing the lower classes to start school again.
When we return, international news. U.S. President Donald Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden engage in vitriolic presidential debate. And later, sport. Sunshine Stars players groan over unpaid salaries.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow this story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. France has launched a free spending budget plan to reduce COVID-19 induced economic damage to the country. The new budget came after France reported more than 14,000 new COVID-19 cases. Health authorities say the fresh spike may overwhelm hospitals even as the government imposed fresh curbs on the spread of the virus, including restaurants, bars and sports facilities. Correspondent Ross Cullen reports.
The France government's pumping $49 billion into the economy in the first year of its two-year recovery plan. But ministers are struggling to navigate a path for the economic recovery when the country is suffering a surge in the number of new coronavirus infections.
The hospitality sector was hit hard by the spring lockdown. Now the second wave of coronavirus cases this autumn has forced the closure of all bars and restaurants in Marseille and the possibility of tougher restrictions here in Paris.
Some analysts say a number of industries like retail and travel will keep suffering despite the government's budgetary measures.
It's very likely that less people will take a plane, that less people will take holidays very far away, that it's very likely that we will shop more online, that we will work from home. It's very likely that we're using more electric cars, not normal cars, less and less. So we have permanent changes in the sectoral structure of the economy.
France's economy was rocked by the effects of the pandemic. Ministers are hoping tax cuts, the green economy, a focus on youth and billions of dollars will paint a brighter economic picture in 2021.
Italian winemakers are ready to transform unsold bottles of wine into hand sanitizer to help the fight against COVID-19. Italian agricultural trade unions say the pandemic has reduced demand to the lowest level in 30 years. Correspondent Hermione Kitson has the story.
Home to the Chianti region, Tuscany is the beating heart of Italy's wine production. But even months after lockdown, the region is struggling.
The loss in the wine sector was enormous. We had sales that fell by more than 40% and in Tuscany by more than 50%. Above all because by closing the entire restaurant sector, the sale of wine suffered a deep crisis.
This year, the world's biggest wine producer also experienced a record decline in exports. But while vineyards are dealing with a surplus of stock, the country is dealing with a deficit of alcohol to create sanitizer. The result, an initiative to turn millions of litres of table wine into hand gel.
So we proposed to the government to seize two opportunities. Firstly, to help those who had unsold wine stocks, and secondly, to finally produce Italian alcohol.
One of those at the sharp end of the production line is technician Matteo Bacci.
It helped a number of vineyards that were full of wine to empty the barrels ahead of the new harvest. Instead of throwing it out, we have used it to create alcohol for hand sanitizer.
His company, that usually creates biocosmetics, is an example of how agriculture is adapting in the face of adversity.
It is a big responsibility to help to create a product that has national importance. So this makes me satisfied because we have worked many hours in the spirit of helping those really in need.
Experts say alcohol derived from wine is also more effective in fighting virus proteins.
And this is the final product. The gel has a rapid absorption, and in just 30 seconds it has the ability to eliminate the COVID virus from your skin.
They've been using 2,500 litres of alcohol a day for the gel, which has been used nationally.
The Italian government has invested $50 million to help subsidise the scheme, but many in the industry say with the crisis far from over, more funding is needed.
An uncertain road ahead as the country works to prevent another devastating shutdown.
We have not won the war yet. We've won some battles, but the number of new cases continue to rise, so we still need to be careful.
Belgium remains one of the hardest hit countries with COVID-19. With a population of more than 11 million, the country has now recorded 10,000 fatalities. Belgium had more than 250 deaths daily during the peak of the pandemic in April. The Belgian government says testing capacity has been stepped up, which has led to a sharp rise in the number of positive cases recorded, particularly now that people have returned to work and schools after the summer holidays. Meanwhile, Romania too has witnessed a spike in coronavirus infections by a record 2,100 in the 24 hours between Tuesday and Wednesday. This brings to more than 127,000 the total number of infections in the country. 4,825 infected persons have died so far. The government has extended a state of alert until mid-October. Since the government eased lockdown restrictions in May, protective masks have become mandatory in public transport and indoor public spaces. With just 35 days to the United States general elections, President Donald Trump and his rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, fiercely engaged each other in the country's first presidential debate of the year. Many described it as one of the most chaotic and rancorous presidential debates in years. There were anger, shouting, and name-calling, while Biden called the president a clown. Trump brought up drug use by his rival's son. Opinion polls suggest Biden has a steady single-digit lead over the incumbent. The debate centered on the COVID-19 pandemic, the candidates' records, the Supreme Court, the pandemic, race relations, election integrity, and the economy. The U.S. president was challenged over white supremacist support and refused to condemn a specific far-right group. Disney's California-based theme park says the company will lay off 28,000 staff members as a result of prolonged closures of the parks. In a memo sent to employees on Tuesday, the company's head of parks, Josh Damaro, says the company's shares fell less than 2% after the closing bell on Tuesday. The statement further reviewed around 67% of the 28,000 laid-off workers are part-time employees, while Disney's theme parks in Florida, Paris, Shanghai, Japan, and Hong Kong have reopened with limited capacity. Both California Adventure and Disneyland have remained shuttered. The company has promised to provide severance packages for the employees and also offer other services to help workers with job placement. Up next, sports. Sunshine Stars players groan over unpaid salaries. Please stay with us.
You are watching ANN.
We are on the road every day, canvassing throughout Africa for news you really need. We follow the story everywhere, from every corner of Nigeria to the wide African expanse. We bring you what's making headlines. We connect you with news you can use. ANN, African News Network, in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. In sports, Nigeria and Africa's #1 table tennis player, Aruna Quadri, is the only African featured in this year's ITTF finals, scheduled between October and December. Quadri currently ranks 20th in the world. The 2020 ITTF finals is contested by the 16 highest-ranked players in the world. Sunshine Stars players have demanded their unpaid salaries. The players say they are owed 4 months' salaries. Midfielder Ikene Hilary says he might be evicted from his house on Thursday since he has been unable to pay his rent. Club captain Abe Sunday says he could no longer meet his family's basic needs. Centre-back Jamil Alimi says he quit the club ahead of the 2020-2021 season because of unpaid salaries. Meanwhile, Chairman of Ondo State Football Agency Tajuddin Akiyemi says the governor will pay the players outstanding salaries. Great gesture by Governor Akeredolu. And that is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.